Ladies and gentlemen, this is our phone, and I'm sure you all have the Google search engine right in front on your screens as a default search engine on your phones. Whenever we have to search something, we search on it on this very Google search bar. But have you ever wondered why it's not the Mozilla search bar or a search bar of the Internet Explorer or even Microsoft Bing search bar? They all provide the same kind of features in search engines, but we never have them, and we always have Google as our default search engines on our phones. Now, the answer to these questions are about to be found soon. In what is being called the biggest legal showdown of the tech industry, the Google versus US government trial is all set to begin, and Silicon Valley giants are closely watching, listening, and observing. And not just them, we all need to follow this trial because we are users of Google. Tech companies permeate our daily lives, from smartphones to smartwatches to now the ChatGPT. And this trial proves Google wrong. If it does prove Google wrong, it would mean we all have been, in a sense, cheated upon. First, let's look at what this case is all about and why I'm saying that we might have been cheated upon by Google. Back in 2020, the US Department of Justice sued tech giant Google on charges that the company paid billions of dollars to Apple and other partner companies to ensure that the Google search engine is default on most of our phones and web browsers, basically stifling competition. Google on its part, meanwhile, says that it engaged in legitimate competition. It also says users can opt to switch the search engines. The American government's lawsuit uses words like exclusionary to describe the fact that Google denied its rivals access to search queries and clicks, thereby monopolizing the search engine market. To this, Google argues that rivals are free to develop search engines and compete with them. But is it that black and white? As per estimates, Google has about 92% dominance in the search market. And when you're already monopolizing the market or buying whatever small company is trying to compete with you, Google's growth practice is anything but transparent. Let's also tell you where Google's rivals stand in the market. Microsoft Bing has a 3% share. Yahoo is at 1.1%. Yandex, another search engine feature, a company that provides search engine feature, is at 1.49%. And DuckDuckGo is at 0.54%. Now, there's also China's Baidu, where Google isn't allowed, and that stands at 1.06%. So these basically on your screens are where Google's rivals stand currently in the search engine feature, and why today we're talking about Google's dominance in the search engine market. And that is exactly why the American government is also questioning Google and has sued it over it. Now, did Google really shut out competitors and harm consumers? That's all of us, by striking deals with phone makers and browsers to be their default search engine? What does the American law say on this? And what's expected in the courtroom in the next 10 weeks, which is the duration to which this trial will continue? I ask my guests tonight. I'm joined by Mishi Choudhary, tech lawyer. She joins us from the United States. Prasanto Roy, technology analyst, also joins us. And Khushbu Jain, advocate and cyber law expert, joins us this evening as well. Good evening and welcome to all of you. Mishi Choudhary, to you first. This is an extremely interesting case where all of us are users of Google, and perhaps it never struck us that, it's just Google that is all over our phones and web browsers. Its search engine is our own default search engine when we haven't even made that choice. And now with this case coming up since 2020, we suddenly realize that, yes, we don't have any other choice except the Google search engine on our phones.
Thank you for having me. I'm actually sitting just 3 blocks away from where the case's opening statements are being made right now. I think in casual conversation, monopoly is used as a pejorative, but not in American antitrust law. It's fine to be a monopoly. And as the numbers you were just showing before we started this discussion, Google definitely has a monopoly over the search market. This is not a problem here. The problem here is that you can, as a big company, be a monopoly, but are you misusing that power? Which is that you can basically use wielding your monopoly to bribe, to bully, to thwart rivals, and undermining competition. And Google says that its contracts with companies like Apple or Samsung, which you are rightly pointing out, if you're using an iPhone or any kind of an Android device, etc., you see that as the default one. This is just legal and it benefits customers. And customers choose Google because the product is superior. That's why Google has become a verb right now. And there is nothing wrong here. However, this is also a test for the entire antitrust agenda of the Biden administration as well. But the lawsuit started during the Trump administration. This will tell us whether the current laws are actually adequate to address all these large companies who have become much more powerful than the country's governments themselves in the last perhaps 1.5 decade of unbridled growth and power. And what does it do to the customer?
Yeah.
You and I, whether we have a choice or not, we don't think about DuckDuckGo or Brave or other such kind of search engines. Has it harmed us? And based on what is going to be argued in the next 10 weeks, we will see, the devil will obviously be in the details, but how does that impact this market? Or if nothing really happens, then if it has to actually change the way our laws were made, which were good for 20th century to break railway monopolies or other such kind of oligopolies, but may not be very good and very or well suited for the 21st century tech companies. And that's why this is very important. But there is another one case which is running
Mishi,
in parallel.
also correct
so we
me.
will be watching.
You said that the case hearing has already opened. Is that
Yes.
right? Did I hear you correctly?
Yes.
That the proceedings have begun?
Yes, the opening statements are being made right now as we talk.
Okay, so the opening statements are being made currently as we speak, as we debate and discuss this issue, whether Google has monopolized and whether it's correct to even monopolize this industry. But let me also go across to Prasanta Roy. Prasanta Roy, it's very convenient for Google to argue that our partners, our business partners, whether it's phone makers or web browsers, they just want to provide high quality services to consumers, which is all of us. But if you don't leave competition in the market and you're the only one left, then phone manufacturers and web browsers only have you as one of the search engines and as the only search engine for consumers to use.
Yeah, that's worrying. Now, I think when it started, if you look at the early days, Google wasn't the first search engine. There were others. There was Alta Vista. There was Yahoo. Google was actually simply better, to be fair to them. I mean, they were very good, and people, when they had a choice, they gradually moved to Google. Now, of course, it's not just the search. You know that on Android in India, it's 95%, 94% share. On our smart TVs, increasingly, it's becoming so. Having said that, as Mishi was saying, what is going to be judged? It's not really harm to competitors. That's not what the US antitrust law is going to judge. It's going to be harm to consumers. And that's going to be tough for the FTC and the government to actually establish. That's been a little easier here, and Google has had some, in a sense, harder hitting rulings from first CCI and then the courts out here. And there have been some about $275 million, not much in terms of the dollar fine amount, but in terms of forcing Google to change its business model here. That's actually happened here. So here, actually, the courts and CCI have taken a stronger view where they see harm to competitors and the competitive ecosystem. and not just harm to consumers. But that's not how it's going to go there.
Okay, Khushbu Jain, clearly there's a difference in how the internet is governed in India and the United States. But if we talk about, why Google is right now present at the courtroom and explaining itself to the judicial system there as to, why, Mishi said that it's not the monopoly which is in question, it's the fact that it comes into question when the technology company becomes extremely huge and there is no other competition left around it. And clearly, over the years, we've seen whether it's Internet Explorer or Mozilla Firefox, these are search giants which we used to use, but now we don't use them anymore. We only have our Google search bar. In India, help us understand what's the kind of law that prevails and how do cyber experts really pave their way through such situations where a company tries to monopolize or dominate the market?
In India, and we have a body that looks into that part, and you can go and file cases against if you see any antitrust or anti-competitive conduct being found by the companies, and that has happened in the past. If I just talk about Google, last year in October, CCI, that is Competition Commission of India, accused Google of exploiting its dominant position and also imposed a fine for unfair business practices. It even went on asking Google to make several changes to its, Android ecosystem. If I talk about what exactly the issue was that it forced manufacturers to pre-install the entire Google Suite app and not allowing the users to choose their default, search engine. So that's where, and I think this is still pending issue. The matter has been challenged by Google. There has been appeal filed against this order, where the penalty was been imposed by CCI on Google. But coming to a direct question, that yes, we do have laws in existence if any kind of competition is being suppressed by engaging into any anti-competitive conduct. So I think the key nutshell over here, which one has to understand, is not that you are in monopoly, but unlawful monopoly, where your market power for a product or the services that you're providing is obtained or is maintained through not merits, but because you have engaged in suppressing competition by engaging into any kind of anti-competitive conduct. So I think that's important over here, not just the monopoly or not just that, your share in your field is 90% or 95%, and the other companies are just minuscule. That's not the enough for bringing in laws against a company, but only the aspect of unlawful monopoly, and whether the firm has engaged into that aspect of suppressing competition by engaging into anti-competitive conduct.
Mishi, also help us understand right now the fact that these proceedings have begun, the hearing has begun. What goes on now? What will the day look like for Google officials who are sitting there explaining to the judges what the company did?
So as we are watching, and you are on the right timeline right now, the Justice Department's lawyer wrapped up their statement. And they said about this feedback loop, he talked about the fact that because Google is the dominant player, they're also able to collect a lot of data and improve the quality of search. And this feedback loop continues and always continues to Google's advantage. You were just now showing pictures of looking up recipes of lasagna or baking something else, etc., or a carrot cake, etc. This just shows how entrenched Google is in our lives and how much data it collects about us, and thereafter uses that data to make its product better. And that cycle has been going on for a long time. The second aspect, in the opening statement, the government's lawyer has argued about this $10 billion number. This you will hear again and again. This lawsuit is that Google pays Apple somewhere around the tune of $10 billion in terms of making it the default search engine. And their case is this fact is a problem for the customer because that costs us as consumers in terms of new innovation, better research, or better kind of options. And that we will see. We are thinking that after the opening statements, at least what we know is the Sundar Pichai, who's the CEO, he definitely will testify. We don't think the co-founders will be testifying. We've also seen a bunch of information because the trial, there has been a lot of lead time for the trial. A lot of documentation exchange happens. We know who the deposing witnesses would be. So we also think some of the senior Apple executives with whom these such deals exist, they are also going to be deposing. I will also add, other than the federal government, 35 other states' attorneys general are also suing Google. So they're also going to be represented, and their opening statement is also happening. We are slowly following.
Okay, Mishi, what's the inclination like? What's the general sense that people there in the United States have on this whole case and the court proceedings that are underway? What do they feel about this whole case?
So I will say that there, for a longest time, everybody has been looking at the European Union as the place where competition law has been used to rein in the companies. Also, European Union was the first to bring a privacy law, which was comprehensive GDPR, in order to check the powers of tech companies. US has generally seemed to be falling behind on all of these issues,
stricter than
and
the
nothing
United
has been
States.
done. Yes, absolutely. And so people now, as you see, have become much more attuned to the power of these companies that they have. What Elon Musk can do in Ukraine can change the course of a war between two countries. What decisions Mark Zuckerberg makes can actually determine what outcome of elections would be. So in the past decade and a half, before that, everybody was really enamored. Tech is very fascinating. Oh, new things. We like everything. However, the downside of surveillance capitalism, all the data that gets collected, all of the data that we lose to breaches, the enormous power of these companies, people have become much more sensitive, and they wanted the governments to do something. And that is why the cases are being watched with great interest. But I don't want to give you the lawyer's answer, but it is the lawyer's answer. Devil is in the details. It will depend what the outcome is. It is not going to be win or lose like a movie, but it is going to be a lot about you can make certain changes, you can make certain differences here, etc. Or it would just tell us more about how laws have to change to catch up with new technology. In the very opening statement, you talked about ChatGPT, and now there are a lot of lawsuits trying to determine when you create something with ChatGPT, is it your creation or is it the machine's creation? Who owns the rights on that one? And the various other discussions about all of these technologies are now being determined. And India occupies a very, very important place, not only because of the geopolitics of the world, but also because it is one of the largest and very important market for all of these companies. And that's why what's happening at the CCI level or at the level of what the government decides always determines a lot about what the companies would do in future.
Absolutely. And what's also interesting is the Indian angle, the other Indian angle, Mishi, in this whole case is that Sundar Pichai is heading the Google, of course, but also the judge in this case is Amit Mehta. So we have that Indian angle as well. And of course, Mishi, like you said, there's no winners or losers in this case, but I hope whatever comes out of it, the consumer is at the end of the day the winner. The users, you and I, are the winners in this whole case. Coming to you, Prasanto, this trial also comes for Google at at a time when it is going through an existential crisis, because it is seeing severe competition from new emerging technologies like OpenAI, AI's chat GPT and other technologies that have come in. Now, Google on its part can say that they are competition, but the federal government might argue that, because Google is so dominant in the market, they might use that monopoly to sort of gain an unfair advantage of owning these emerging technologies first and before other companies.
No, absolutely. So if they can establish abuse of dominance, and that's happened. So in Indian antitrust, in CCI, and again the courts have upheld that there was a 115 or 113 million dollars fine last October, where it was about their payment system, which was pretty exclusionary. They simply didn't allow other payment systems on Android, in the Play Store, and therefore they were able to charge 15 to 30% commission, and that was really protested by a lot of the Indian startups, Paytm, etc. They'd raised this issue, and it was clearly established that yes, there was abuse of dominance here. So that has to be seen. I think they're really worried about hard hitting, and I don't think you're going to have the European Commission, like the EC has put in some $8 billion, 8 billion euros worth of fines. They have threatened to, they're forcing Google almost to break up their the advertising models and so on. So that's not going to happen. But I think, like Mishi said, it's not so much about winners and losers. Even if the FTC and the US, don't find a ruling in their favor, these processes do slow down the tech giants and make them think some of the things may have to change. So we're going to see that. And I think when you step back and look at this whole picture, not just search, but Android and search and smart TV and pretty much everything else, then you begin to worry what abuse of dominance can actually lead to. Even though the search itself, given a choice, many people might just go ahead and pick Google search. So, but I think there will be some positive outcomes of whichever way this ruling goes out here.
Khushbu Jain, when I was researching for this and I was reading through everything that has happened related to this case, and I was wondering, why we don't see Internet Explorer anymore, or why don't we use Mozilla Firefox anymore and we turn to Google all the time? There was a case where Microsoft was accused of doing the same thing 20 years back with the Internet Explorer, that it was accused of using practices that will make the Internet Explorer dominate the market, the search engine market, and the web browser market. But perhaps that time there was less awareness and the internet was just emerging in the world, specifically in this part of the world. Therefore, there was very less talk about it, and people didn't know much about it as compared to now. What changed over several years, and why is it so important for you and I, for people like us, to actually sit and discuss why it's not a good thing that one company is dominating all our cyber features?
Very important thing here is, time then and time now has changed drastically. You were just talking about OpenAI, you were talking about AI coming in place. And if you see, everything is now dependent on the data. The more the data, more the research, and these technologies cannot work without data. So I think that's where the whole game plays now, that if one company is getting into monopoly by using tactics which are unlawful, that's where the whole problem comes for users like you and me, and also for countries. That a tech giant, a big company, will have an edge over anything else, and will have more the data and all their sister concerns. And we have seen in the past how small companies were being benefited, who the tech giant had interest into, and did not allow anybody. If I may talk about, there was a famous matrimony case in India, in CCI, where only when you search things related to that, only the one which was backed by Google used to come in the top or in the search engine, as a result, and not other companies which Indian startups had developed. So that kind of behavior did come, and Google was being asked to change that, and there was a fine which was put in. But today we are literally living in the age of information, and we are living virtually, and that's where I think what has been changed from then to now, that we need more competition, we need the data to be more transparent, and there should be more accountability, and that cannot happen with one company trying to create the entire monopoly, and has tons of companies under its under its umbrella, and that's how the sharing thing happens. So I think one of the outcome which they are looking out, if the US wins, is the aspect where they are expecting, that the agreements, the anti-competitive agreements are being, uh, should be prohibited, one, and also they would ask to prohibit pre-installation of any competitive search service, and if it can go to a length, if they are wanting it to go to a length that the search engine company separates itself from the other companies. I mean, that's a long shot which we are thinking of looking into it. But in a nutshell, I would put that a situation like this puts us as a user or as a country in a better state, because more the competition, more the fairness comes in, and a better services that comes to the users. So monopoly is never good for the user. Monopoly is never good for the country. So I mean, that's where I think some better outcome can come out of it, or at least some
in today's
sanity
time. Yeah, in today's time, we crib about how there are so many choices and we're spoiled for choices, but sometimes perhaps it's good to have more choices. So, there's fair play and we have more diversity. But let me wrap this up. A quick last closing comments from all of you. Khushbu, I'll start with you. What's the solution then? How do you go about such situations where a particular company is trying to dominate the market?
I think the solution is not in your and my hand, because solution would have been good if we go to some other platform and start working on it. But we go where we get the best result, and the result is dependent on more the data these companies have. They'll churn more data and they'll give you a detailed results what you need. So I think there is where a competition commission has to step in, and the laws have to work, and we have to leave it in the hands of the government to enforce laws in this scenario. That's about it.
Okay. Okay, Prasanta Roy. Prasanta Roy, do we see any change happening in the current scenario? Do we have more choices? Do we want to be more spoiled for choices?
No, so I think one big thing that you were asking was change. So one of the things that's changed is the world is more mobile. So in India, out of a billion users, I mean there are 1.1 billion phones, 850 million smartphones. There are very few PCs. On the PCs, you had an easier access to choice in terms of just switching browsers, etc. What is pre-installed is is kind of more defining on the phone. So that's important. I think in terms of the answer, well, you need antitrust oversight, and we've seen that happening in India. And I think you perhaps arguably need that more in India, where you have a lot of newer internet users who will not easily, change the underlying stuff that they're packaging. The apps and all are different. So we've seen some fairly strong rulings here, which I think have been good. And essentially, there's a pressure on Google to really offer choice of the search engine and of in-app billing, which has now come down from the 30% levels to still about maybe 13, 14% kind of commissions. But I think we've seen action there. Similarly, in this case, whatever happens, I think we will see some changes and some slowdown of this juggernaut of monopoly.
Mishi, the case is underway, the court proceedings have started, but do you see any headway, any breakthrough in these proceedings there in the US?
Well, right now they've taken a break for lunch, which I will also do after this call. But and then they would start testifying the witnesses. What is going to happen is, if the last time the Department of Justice went after a big tech monopoly was in 1998 against Microsoft. And that went through various rounds of trials, it went through different courts, and then it was settled. So what we are going to see definitely is the trial, which is going to go on for the next 10 weeks. Thereafter, the advertisement case, which also the Department of Justice is pursuing, will also be coming up. This is being watched by several other tech companies as well, because it will determine what is going to look like an agenda for the next 3 or 4 years. I will also say is that choice is always good for us. If you go in a United States a grocery store, there's an entire aisle of cereals which are being offered there. When I was growing up in India, we went from perhaps one option to a variety of options. But as a customer, what we want is that companies are forced to innovate in the right direction. We are right now the product because everybody is collecting a lot of data. That is why we get to use these products for price zero. Google doesn't charge us for any search. When you look up for maps or anything else, nobody's being charged. So what we want is that in return of all of it, right now we are paying with our data. So as a customer, I would like to be able to actually use Brave or or DuckDuckGo or something else, because there is some other product in the market which is not making me the product and is also offering me something which now I value a lot more than I understood a decade and a half, which is my privacy, my data collection, and what happens with all of that. That is why I think that this reckoning of whether antitrust laws are sufficient to address the growing power of companies is an important reckoning to happen all around the world. We are going to see several other steps which different regulators and the governments will take, including the European Union, Indian government, as well as the United States, in order to check the growing power of companies, which has gone unbridled for a long time. And that is why we are right now going to be watching privacy legislations and other things coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. It is clearly a long-drawn battle to regulate the vast arena that the internet is. It has for long gone unregulated, and now perhaps is the time to take stock of it and regulate it as and when we can. But of course, like Mishi said, if the service is free, you are being spent. So we have to be careful on what we use, what we consume on the internet, and how we use it. But for now, I'm going to wrap this up. To my panelists, Khushbu Jain, Prasanta Roy, and Mishi Choudhary, thank you very much for joining us on Mirror Now and sharing your perspective on this big battle that has now gone underway in the United States as we speak between tech giant Google and the American government.